What is going on, people? Welcome back to Kai Talks Combat. Since the involvement of Riyadh season in boxing, we have had some massive cards. And after a long period of stagnation in the sport, we are finally seeing the best fight the best. The fights that we have wanted to see for so long. Fury versus Usyk, Beterbiev versus Bivol, and so many more. We've had so many big nights of boxing. The Day of Reckoning, the Ring of Fire, AJ versus Dubois at Wembley, and so many more huge nights. So when we were hearing Turki Al-Sheikh, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren talk about this February Riyadh season event, and they were telling us that this card was going to be the biggest and best yet, I thought to myself, how can this possibly get any better? We have now had the official and formal announcement of the card, and ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute monster. I don't think I have ever seen a more stacked card in my entire life. I am absolutely gassed for this one. I cannot lie. Every single fight could be a main event in its own right. We're going to be previewing the card today, starting with that main event and working our way down the bill. Before we do though, guys, if you haven't already and you're new here, hit that subscribe button for me and smash that like button for me whilst you're there. It helps the channel grow massively and will be doing your boy a very big favour. The rematch between Artur Beterbiev and Dubois Bivol for the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world tops the card. Their first fight back in October of this year was a generational scrap. Two undefeated champions going head to head. Beterbiev, the unified champion, with a perfect record going into the fight, with 20 wins and 0 defeats. All 20 of those wins coming by way of knockout, meaning that in all 20 of his previous fights, no man that had entered the ring against him survived to see the final bell. That is absolutely terrifying. It really is. With some of his most notable wins, including Callum Smith and Anthony Yarde. Dubois Bivol came into the fight with another undefeated record with 22 wins and 0 defeats. With his most notable wins coming against the pound-for-pound great in Canelo, Saul Alvarez, and the current WBA and WBO unified cruiserweight champ, Gilberto Ramirez. It was a historic night and marked the first time that we had had an undisputed light heavyweight champion since that night in 1999 when Roy Jones Jr. defeated Reggie Johnson to unify the WBA, WBC and IBF belts. And the very first time in the 4-belt era. And it was a fight that had been bubbling for a long time, with both men practically growing up with each other and having known each other for years, having been teammates on the Russian national boxing amateur team. Beterbiev is 6 years older than Bivol and was a senior on the team when Bivol was just starting out. Around this time, Beterbiev was winning European and world level championships, and Bivol would have looked up to him. He would have seen Beterbiev achieving all the things that he wanted to and would have said to himself, that will be me one day. There is a lot of history between both men, including sparring stories that neither man has disclosed much about. So when this fight was announced, I knew we were in for a belter. The two greatest 175-pounders on the planet colliding together and putting it all on the line. And it lived up to the hype and so much more. It was the best technical display of boxing that we had seen in years. A chess match between two elite level operators, and it was a ridiculously close fight. It really was. With Beterbiev winning by majority decision. In my opinion, it was really hard to separate the two men and could have easily have gone either way. When watching it live, I felt that Dubois Bivol had done enough to get the decision. And then when watching it back a couple of days later, I felt like Beterbiev was right to get the decision in what was still an incredibly close fight. And I'm sure if I watched it back again, I could easily swing it back the other way in favour of Bivol. It really was that close. And so in the immediate aftermath, the only fight that I wanted to see next for both men was that rematch. Following the fight, there was a lot of talk about Beterbiev having a potential mandatory and that the rematch could potentially be shelved until the end of 2025. And so it is an understatement to say that I am buzzing that we get to see this one again so soon, and that it's still for undisputed and for all the marbles, and the sanctioning bodies haven't stripped Beterbiev of any of the belts like the IBF did with Usyk. Will it be a repeat? Or will it be revenge? Coming into the first fight, I felt like this was a real 50-50. And coming into this rematch, I feel like, again, it's a real 50-50 fight. Both men landed significant shots last time round. However, I think Beterbiev landed the shots of more consequence and hurt Bivol a lot more than Bivol hurt Beterbiev. Another factor to consider is that leg of Beterbiev's will be a lot more recovered now following the injury in the lead up to their first fight. And so presumably he will be even more active this time around. Equally, let's not forget, by the time these two see each other in the ring once again, Beterbiev will have turned 40. And although the age difference wasn't a factor in their first fight, as we all know, Father Time is undefeated. And so it does ask the question whether or not Beterbiev's age will show in the ring for their rematch. An advantage for both men going into the rematch is, of course, they will both have 12 rounds of data to utilise against their opponent. Who wins? We'll have to wait and see. At the moment, as it stands today, my head is leaning towards Artur Beterbiev to get the job done again. But every time I think that, I remember just how close the first fight was. And I just wonder whether Bivol will be able to make it one apiece. Although I'm picking Beterbiev to get the W today, I'll more than likely change my mind at least once in the lead up to February. For the co-main, we have got an absolute belter. What a fight this is. IBF heavyweight champion of the world, Daniel Dynamite Dubois, is making a voluntary defense against the one and only Joseph Parker. Dubois could have picked anyone in the top 15 of the IBF rankings following that spectacular victory over Anthony Joshua in front of a packed out Wembley. And in the immediate aftermath of that victory, there was a lot of talk about who his next opponent might be. At first, it looked like it might be AJ again for the immediate rematch. But due to injury, Joshua wasn't going to be ready for that February date. Then it looked like Fabio Wardley could be next, with the IBF saying they would be happy for Daniel Dubois to make a voluntary defense against Wardley. But shortly after, Frank Warren came out and said he wouldn't look to make that fight next. And so that was off of the cards as well. All the while, there was one man's name on everybody's lips. One man who everybody wanted to see get a shot at the title. And that man was the former WBO heavyweight champion of the world, Joseph Parker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a heavyweight blockbuster. Both men are in the form of their lives and are coming off of a great run of victories. The challenger, Joseph Parker, is coming off of massive back-to-back wins against Zhilei Zhang and Deontay Wilder, putting a one-sided beatdown on Wilder, who just didn't have any answer for Parker's onslaught. And during his last outing against Zhilei Zhang, one of the boogeymen of the division, following his back-to-back KO victories over Joe Joyce, climbed off of the canvas twice to go on to win on the judges' scorecards. Following his knockout loss to Joe Joyce in September of 2022, Joe Parker's comeback has been spectacular. Even saying that Parker lost to Joe Joyce just seems crazy now, given he beat the man who beat him in Zhilei Zhang and where Joyce sits currently in the heavyweight landscape. Parker is no pushover, and so you have to give massive credit to Dubois for even taking this fight as a voluntary defense. Given the run that Parker has been on, like I say, I feel like we are looking at a prime Parker going into this fight. But speaking of runs, Dubois is on a run of his own, and one of the best runs we've seen in the division in recent years, with back-to-back wins over Gerald Miller, Filip Hrgović, and Anthony Joshua. For all three of which the vast majority, myself included, picked against him. But each and every time he proved us all wrong. He beat up the bully in Gerald Miller, who on the night weighed almost 100 pounds heavier than him. Stopped the boogeyman in Filip Hrgović during a time where he was arguably the most avoided in the division, and then went on to do an ice-cold demolition job on one of the kings of the division, Anthony Joshua. What an incredible run. And what a resume this man has. Let's just take a look at some of the names he shared the ring with. Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk, Gerald Miller, Filip Hrgović, Joe Joyce, Kevin Lerena, and now Joseph Parker, all at only 27 years of age. Dubois is the real deal, ladies and gentlemen. And he's come a long, long way since those losses to Alexander Usyk and Joe Joyce. As Usyk, Fury, Joshua, and these other top guys enter the final chapters of their careers, you start to look around and ask yourself who the next guys to carry the torch will be. Well, look no further, because Dubois, in my opinion, is the new kid on the block. And as the old guard call it a day and walk away from the sport, I think he could reign at the top of the division for a long, long time to come. But there is a man that is currently standing in his way, and that man is a Joseph Parker that is hungrier than ever to become a two-time world champion. And at only 32 years of age is in the prime of his life. This is gonna be an absolute scrap. Honestly, I'm so excited for this one. I really, really am. As for who my pick is, again, I see this as a real 50-50, with either man being able to take it, but I've got the younger man in Dubois just having the edge ever so slightly. And although it won't be an easy night's work by any means, I just think Dubois is on another level right now. And as much as I'm a huge fan of Big Joe Parker, after picking against him for the last 3 fights against Joshua, Hrgovic and Miller, I can't bet against Triple D again, man. I just can't. Next up, we have got the WBC lightweight champion of the world, Shakur Stevenson, making a defense of his belt against Floyd Kid Austin Schofield. Shakur is making his long-awaited Riyadh season debut after pulling out of a scheduled fight in October on the undercard of Beterbiev VS Bivol against Joe Cordina due to a hand injury that required surgery. The former Olympian and 3-division world champion is fighting a young, hungry prospect in Floyd Schofield. Floyd has been chasing this fight for a long time, with there being a lot of back and forth over Twitter and socials between both men, with Shakur basically laughing in Schofield's face saying, "Bro, you're not ready for me, you're not on my level." And Schofield basically saying, "Okay, cool, if that's what you think, put your money where your mouth is, let's run it." Now, in my opinion, there were a number of other opponents that should have been further up the list as potential matchups for Shakur. Gervonta Tank Davis and William Zepeda being the 2 obvious ones. But also, what about Joe Cordina, who he was previously scheduled to fight in October? I don't know, maybe those fights weren't available, and maybe we'll see some of those fights further down the road, but I just feel like there were other viable options there. Schofield was heavily advised, of course, by his promoter Oscar De La Hoya to not take this fight, implying essentially that it was a little bit too much too soon for the young prospect. But to his credit, Floyd said, "Nah, forget all that, I want this fight," and was able to push it through and get the fight signed. Fair play to him. The guy has balls the size of bowling balls to take a fight of this magnitude this early on in his career, and he has to be commended for that. He is only young, and at only 22 years of age has his whole career ahead of him. And this is a huge step up for him. Massive, massive props to him for being willing to chase greatness. And whilst you do absolutely have to rate it, I do have to make Shakur an overwhelming favourite in this one. Next up, we have yet another belter of a scrap. The WBC World Middleweight Champion Carlos Adames taking on Hamza Shiraz. Now, this is an intriguing matchup. It really is. And will be a tough night at the office for both men. Hamza is probably one of the toughest opponents Carlos could have as a challenger. And Carlos is the toughest opponent that Hamza has ever shared the ring with. Carlos is an aggressive inside fighter that fights in both stances and switches from orthodox to southpaw. He's not afraid to sit in the pocket and trade shots with anyone, and he can absolutely bang. He comes into this fight with 24 victories and only 1 defeat, with 18 of his victories coming by way of knockout. His 1 defeat being delivered to him by the then WBO light middleweight world champion Patrick Teixeira, with Patrick defeating Carlos by unanimous decision. Since that defeat 5 years ago, Carlos made the move up to middleweight and has been on a 6-fight winning streak ever since, becoming the WBC middleweight champion in the process. Hamza Shiraz is also coming off of a fantastic run of his own, with wins against Tyler Denny, Austin Ammo Williams and Liam Williams. And his record coming into this fight is a perfect one, with 21 wins and no defeats, and a fellow knockout artist with 17 of those victories coming by way of knockout. And he is looking better and better each time out under the bright lights. I've been saying it for a while now, and I will say it again. Hamza Shiraz is a serious problem in that middleweight division. He really is. At 6'3", he is massive for a middleweight. He absolutely dwarfs these guys. On fight night, after the weigh-ins, that guy is well north of 160 pounds. Again, it's another 50-50 and one that I feel can go to either man. As for now, I've got to back my guy Hamza Shiraz for the win. I personally think this guy is a special fighter. And not only do I think he could beat Adames, but I personally feel he has a real chance of going on to unify the division. It will by no means be an easy night's work for Shiraz, but I am absolutely backing my fellow Brit to do the business. Next up, we've got Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Israel Madrimov for the WBC World Interim Super Welterweight Championship. Now, initially, we were hearing rumours that Vergil Ortiz was due to fight Jaron Boots Ennis on this card, and I believe that was the original plan, but with Boots currently at 147 pounds and unsure whether or not he will be moving up to 154 pounds just yet, Israel Madrimov stepped in as the replacement to take on the undefeated Vergil Ortiz. Madrimov is very quickly becoming one of my favourite fighters, man. This guy will have it with absolutely anyone, anywhere, anytime. And he's coming into this fight off the back of a massive 2024, winning the vacant WBA Super Welterweight title against the, at the time, undefeated Magomed Kurbanov in Riyadh on the undercard of AJ versus Ngannou. And then just 5 months later in August, took on the undefeated pound-for-pound great that is Terence Bud Crawford at the BMO Stadium in Los Angeles. And although he lost that fight on the judges' scorecards, it was a very close fight, and Madrimov put in an excellent performance and gave an absolutely outstanding display of himself. Madrimov, of course, initially accepted the fight against Ortiz in February, whilst already being scheduled to fight Boachuk on the undercard of Fury and Usyk. Again, this guy is about it. Signing to fight Vergil Ortiz in February, when you have the man that is Sergey Boachuk to overcome in December, is absolutely nuts, mate. Especially when, let's not forget, Boachuk gave Ortiz his toughest night to date. Now, of course, in the last week, Israel has now pulled out of that fight next week against Boachuk due to being unwell, with Ishmael Davis stepping in as a late replacement. But to have even contemplated taking on both men with weeks apart from both fights is just so gangster. It really is. Is he really unwell, or has he simply been advised to wait until February and to take the higher profile fight against Ortiz? If I was a betting man, then I would say it was the latter. But to be honest, I'm not angry about it. Ortiz is also going into their February 2025 matchup coming off of an active 2024, fighting 3 times this year and winning the WBC Interim World Super Welterweight title against a tough and game opponent last time out in Vegas in August against the before mentioned Boachuk, winning the WBC Interim title in the process. Ortiz has a record of 22 wins and 0 defeats, with 21 of those victories coming by way of knockout, with no one apart from Boachuk ever surviving to see the final bell. Both men, in my opinion, are special fighters, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them go up against each other in what will be, in my opinion, another very close 50-50 fight. So much so that as it stands today, I'm really struggling to separate either man. And so I'm afraid on this one, for now at least, I'll be sitting firmly on the fence. I'll make a prediction nearer the time, but I just need a bit more time to digest and dissect this one. I just do. What I can tell you though is I think this one is going to be an absolute banger and has fight of the night written all over it. Also on the card, we have got another serious heavyweight dust-up between Zhilei Big Bang Zhang and Zhang Kabayel for the vacant WBC Interim Heavyweight Championship. Both guys are top contenders in the division, and both men are coming off of some incredible nights in Riyadh season. Kabayel coming into this one undefeated with 25 wins, coming off of 2 spectacular back-to-back knockout wins against 2 previously undefeated guys in Frank Sanchez and Arslan Makhmudov, dropping Makhmudov 3 times with the fight being waved off in the 4th, and in his most recent outing against Sanchez, dropped the Cuban fighter twice in the 7th and not making the count, the referee waving the contest off. This man is a serious problem, and in my opinion, we could well be looking at a future heavyweight world champion. But there is one man that stands in his way, and that man is Zhilei Big Bang Zhang. Zhang is coming off of his own spectacular knockout win against former WBC World Heavyweight Champion Deontay Wilder. And although there's an argument to make that this version of Wilder was a shadow of his former self, Zhang walked him down and smashed him from pillar to post, knocking him out in the 5th round of their contest. Zhang has some crazy power, and this knockout was scary. Wilder looked like he didn't know where he was, who he was, or what day of the bloody week it was in there. Like, he was gone. He's coming into this one with a record of 27 wins, 1 draw and 2 defeats, only losing to top-level guys in Filip Hrgović and one of the men featuring on the co-main of this card, Joseph Parker. With his loss to Hrgović being a controversial one, and many, myself included, feeling like he had done enough that night to get the decision over the Croatian. And let's also not forget that Zhang was the man to put an end to Joe Joyce's run of success, with Joyce prior to his back-to-back defeats to Zhang being touted as one of the top guys in the division, with wins over both men featuring in the co-main heavyweight title fight, Dubois and Parker. Honestly, I'm so excited for this one, and this is another one that has fight of the night written all over it. As for who I'm backing to get the W, I think you have to back the younger man in Zhang Kabayel to have the edge in the fight. But by no means can you count out Big Bang Zhang. And last but not least, we have Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith. Another absolute banger. Buatsi, a former Olympic medalist, winning bronze in Rio in 2016. He's the current interim WBO light heavyweight champion of the world and has held this title since September of 2024. He's also the former British and Commonwealth champion. Buatsi, ladies and gentlemen, is the real deal, and he is coming into this fight with a winning record of 19 wins and 0 defeats. And he is on an excellent run of form right now, with back-to-back wins against credible opponents in Craig Richards, Powell Stepan, Dan Aziz, and last time out on the AJ Dubois undercard, Willie Hutchinson. I was actually present at the O2 that night, and that was an unbelievable scrap. A lot of bad blood in the lead up to that one, and that showed in Buatsi's performance. He showed a lot of spite and aggression in there, dropping Hutchinson in the 6th and 9th rounds and winning a split decision on the judges' scorecards, which in my opinion should have been a lot wider in Buatsi's favour. He has been looking incredible as of late, and in my opinion is one of the top guys at light heavy outside of Beterbiev and Bivol, and in my eyes firmly holds that number 3 spot in the division. And then you have the challenger Callum Smith, a former world champion, previously the WBA and Ring Magazine super middleweight champion. Callum won the title back in 2018 against George Groves in Saudi for the World Super Series, stopping Groves in the 7th round with a shot to the body and in turn winning the World Boxing Super Series. Coincidentally, that also took place in Saudi. So who knows, maybe returning to the country where he won his belt will be a good luck charm for him. He made 2 successful defenses of that belt and then went on to lose to the pound-for-pound great Canelo Alvarez, which there is absolutely no shame in. Canelo being a pound-for-pound great, and in my opinion, being in the peak of his prime at the time they fought. The Canelo pre the Bivol fight was just unstoppable, in my opinion. And so there is no shame losing to that man whatsoever. After moving up to light heavy, he then came up against one of the men topping this bill, Artur Beterbiev, back in January of this year. And like every other man that has ever faced Beterbiev, came up short, being dropped by Beterbiev twice in the 7th, and his trainer Buddy McGirt throwing the towel in, saving his man to live to fight for another day. If we're brutally honest, it was a one-sided beatdown, but that is no shade on Callum and is only a credit to how good Artur Beterbiev is. And again, there is no shame in losing to a pound-for-pound great in Beterbiev. Smith made his return on the undercard of Sonny Edwards versus Galal Yafai and fought a guy called Carlos Gavan and got his man out of there in the 5th round. Again, this could be fight of the night contender in my eyes. It really could. And again, is another 50-50 matchup. But if I had to pick one man to win, I would have to give it to the more recently active fighter in Joshua Buatsi. Honestly, guys, this card is just so fucking stacked. It's mental. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I am absolutely buzzing. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of the card? Who have you got winning each of the fights? Let me know your picks below. If you haven't already, what are you doing, mate? Smash that like button for me and hit subscribe. And until next time, I will catch you guys on the next one.